So, welcome to the Gentle Art Podcast with Gene Dunn. We're continuing our Dojo series with Kiyoshi Thomas Clifford. Welcome,
Thank you.
Kiyoshi. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
So we were discussing that I recently got a call from one of my instructors that they had found out that a longtime black belt had was teaching at another school, local karate school, and was bringing students with him. You know, it's like contacting students, and especially now during this time, you know, it's a very frustrating thing. You know, I thought it might be an interesting topic, one, because it's happening in real time, right? It's like a challenge that I'm dealing with right now, but also that I think that, like, eventually in some sort of way, people are going to experience some version of this, whether you're the black belt that wants to go out on his own, or you're the instructor that has a black belt that hasn't mentioned that to you, or you're finding out through another way. And so I thought it would be an interesting topic. I had kind of had a match at discussing, that ultimately there's no way that we can benefit from taking something from another person. That was kind of like the topic, the lesson for me, and I was working with my mentor on it. And we were discussing that it's really important that people understand that, there might be short-term gain, but there's never going to be long-term benefit from trying to take something from someone and building your own. It's just two different things. So, I thought that would be a good place to start. What are some of your thoughts there,
Well, I'm all over the map with this subject because it's very it's multifaceted. It's multidimensional. There's a lot to it. So let's hear about the specific situation that you're in, and then there's a few different schools of thought around it. I have mixed opinions on it. So
it is a complex issue. When I found out, I got on the phone with the guy and I was like, look, like, I don't know what I did to make you think that you just couldn't come to me and say, Shion, like, I want to go teach, I couldn't stop him anyway, but just like, what did I do to be the type of person that had to find out in this roundabout way that this person is doing that? And I was like, whatever it is I did, man, I'm sorry. But I don't think you realize, like, had you have come to me and said, Shion, like, I want to teach and this is what I'm thinking about doing, I would have given you my full support. I want you to have the same opportunities and blessings as I had when I went and taught myself. Like, it's kind of part of the process. It's part of the evolution of a student, if you will. And I said, man, but I'm really disappointed. I'm really disappointed that you felt the need to not say something, and two, that like, I'm finding out that, like, what you're doing is you're pulling students from the schools to have them go, and you're creating some dissension. And I said, I can't really have that. That's a problem for me.
Yeah, it's a rough one. It's an interesting one. It's fascinating that your choice of words are that this fellow is creating dissension, because in your mind, you're not even capable
that if there was dissension, it's all my it's all my fault. It's all my.
No, 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 not at all. That you're not even capable of saying that he's not creating dissension. He's quite possibly just trying to destroy what you worked so hard to build. Like, you don't want to use the word destroy.
Mhm.
You give him the benefit of the doubt and use the word create.
Mhm.
You at least acknowledge that it's dissension that he's likely creating. But you're either on a creation cycle or a destruction cycle.
Mhm.
In Chinese medicine, there's two essential cycles.
Mhm.
One's creation and one's destruction. And you're on one or the other. And you have a real hard time getting off the creation cycle.
I don't want to be on the destruction
Yeah,
cycle.
yeah, I can tell. You don't even want to dip your toe in the
You
water.
know, it's interesting because I, I, I said to him, I said, I never went to your job, right? Like the place that you get a paycheck from and created a problem for you. Like I could easily go over to your job and start trouble. Like I would never even think that. Like, but
Chaos. Yeah.
yeah, what made you think it was okay to do that here? And like,
So
go ahead.
so I'll give you some answers if he was not capable of answering himself. Did he give you answers? Because I have some.
No, he was like, yeah, I didn't think about it, and that wasn't my intention. And I was like, well, I don't know about that, man.
Well, I've been, my
This thing is
children.
rabbit hole. Like this is got, there's some deeper thoughts here now.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you go ahead.
Well, there's this thing called Secret Roll Club. I don't know if it's called SRC, right?
Don't know about it.
Yeah, it was like this movement that got started out of one of my schools.
Oh,
One of the schools, right? And what it was a few guys getting together at this guy's job. And I'm not going to mention it because it could get back to his boss,
yeah.
right? But and so what was going on was that they wanted to do the, in quotations, real jujitsu. Like I
Sure.
wasn't teaching real jujitsu,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
my pedigree wasn't enough. The stories aren't enough. The ass whoopings are not enough. Like, the way I was running the school safely wasn't real jujitsu. So what happened was they invited a few guys, and that turned into 20 and 30 guys. And then that turned into this idea that they were going to go around the country to dojos and like have guest instructors and call it the Secret Roll Club. And it fell flat on its face. And, these guys came back with their tails in between their legs. And I was like, fine, like it's water under the bridge. And like, let's go. Like, I know, like, I've been tough. Like, I don't, in the very beginning of this thing, like in 2005, 2006, 2007, I was the guy doing the warm-ups, doing the bow, doing the student creed, having everybody wear the same color uniform. It was radical. There was no like social acceptance of that at that point. And, I fought long and hard for there to be some standardization in jujitsu.
Yes.
And now all that's changed. So the perception has changed. There's a lot of social, like you can see social proof that was where this thing was headed. It just took 10 years,
Yeah.
right? So I was like water under the bridge. But then now, and especially in this moment where like I've already closed a school and like the rest of my schools, it feels uncertain. We're working very hard to keep them open, to have someone go to a different school, and never mind like the owner of that school. That's not martial art protocol. Like what in the world why would you want to drown someone that's like doing the same thing? What's the implication there? Like that person's got some real negative points of view. But I had said to him, like, there's also one other part to this story. Like, these guys from Secret Roll Club, some of them were former staff members. And what they did was they stole contacts. They,
Yeah.
they like went into my database and stole stuff, which is illegal, which, like it's, and so I had said to this guy, like, this was water under the bridge, and now you're doing it again. You're actually repeating the same thing in this moment that like, do you actually hate me that much? Do you actually like, and he was like, no, Shion, like, it's not like that. And I said, well, it is like that. And I said, like, have you thought that like this is a deeper problem for you? That like this is, I said, you cheating on your wife too? And he's like, no. But all of his friends, all of the guys at the school have like said, like, this guy's like all over the map, man. Of course he's cheating on his wife. Like, he's gonna lose his wife and his house with this behavior. It's not just that. So it's kind of historically frustrating.
Yes.
And he does not have answers. He did not have answers.
So, one of the answers is that I would like to see all of the people who train at my school, dare I say, under my direction, have a program of their own. I would love to see them all take responsibility for influencing a significant number of people in a program of their very own.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say their very own, I mean their own and the people who they're influencing, that they have a group. And what's interesting, I'll say it this way. When I was a kid, we had a garden. We grew tomatoes, and my neighbors grew tomatoes. The Titans, they grew tomatoes, and I had all the tomatoes I wanted in my own garden, but somehow the Titans tomatoes just tasted so much better when I stole them.
Uh-huh.
Because I my brain wasn't fully developed, and I was psychologically disturbed. So I took great pleasure in stealing my neighbor's tomatoes, and even when I didn't want tomatoes, and they were delicious. So you're up against the fact that you have a guy who's probably, and I'd rather say it to him rather than about him, but since he's not here, maybe he can listen to this and get in touch. But yeah, but he probably has some disturbances, some with his spirit, and blah blah blah. But the bright side is what you've done is this person's enchanted with the idea of having a martial arts school, of having a dojo, though always in the most half-hearted of ways. Like, I'm going to run classes at my workplace, possibly while I'm on the clock, but no one's the wiser. And while I'm on the clock, we're going to lay down some mats and run some classes. And that's kind of half-hearted. That's kind of non-committal. That's sort of make-believe. And then there's let me go to somebody else's school because I don't have enough fortitude to make a commitment and kind of run some classes here in a half-hearted way and pose and pretend that I'm the genuine article, that I'm the real McCoy. So the good news is that you've enchanted this person, that you've inspired them with the idea that it's a noble cause, it's a worthy undertaking. but apparently this person's misguided in their approach. And sooner or later, initially or eventually, there'll be consequences. There always are. There's always consequences. There's good ones, there's bad ones, but there are always consequences. And they're probably not going to be the greatest of consequences. But again, it's not unique. This is happening.
I know, all over the place. I was one of the consequences is like I was like, I don't know how you're gonna make this right, but you can never return to the dojo until you do.
Yeah.
You better, if you want to come back to the dojo, like you better think about how you're gonna make this right. And
Yeah.
this is stacked up on some stuff. I thought it might be interesting to discuss, like, if you're a black belt listening to it, like what's a non-misguided way, or how do you broach this? How do you go to your instructor, whether they're amenable or not? And I was going to tell my story about it, and what's the right way. And there are 2 points that I want to make. Like, many times people have contacted me from Henzo's, and they've gone I want to come train with you. And I'm like, no. And they're like, what do you mean? You don't got an open mat? You don't let people come and train? It's like, no, hell no. And frankly, you're already my teacher's student. You already have a teacher. You can't bypass that relationship just because something over here looks interesting. And I've said that many times, and that's my personal preference. That's how I choose to kind of operate. But I don't want my instructor to think in any way that I'm in direct competition with him, or that there's some sort of limited resource or limited amount of students. And so in that way, sorry, man, you've got a home, stay there. You're in the best place possible. And I remember in 1993, late 93, I came to Mr. Miyazaki and Mr. Leung, and I was like, look, it's my dream to have a karate school. And I would love to open up a Miyazaki karate dojo. How can we do that? I was already a black belt. I was already 6-time national champion. I had a reputation. I was doing all these things. And, it was my dream. And I thought the best way to do that is to do that with my teachers. And in those days, whether they didn't believe in me, or they thought that that might have been some sort of threat against the organization, they said no. And so I went back. I was teaching and I was working, and after a bit, I came back to them and I was like, okay, look, I really want to have a karate school. It's really my life's dream. And if I can't do it with the Miyazaki name, would I still have your blessings? And I would gladly pay you, a sensei fee. I would love to support the organization in some way and have some guidance. And again, the answer was no. And it was only then that I embarked out on the journey and, went and opened up a school.
Mm-hmm.
And all the while, and this, all the while, I've always positioned myself to help the Miyazaki organization. I never once, thought that it wasn't my responsibility to help help grow the place that fostered me.
Yeah, it would be masochistic.
Yeah, just one other point, just to kind of hammer this home, if you're a black belt listening, I remember in 2003, when I was a brown belt, someone opened up a school a half a block away from mine, and they were advertising jujitsu. And I was like, what? I don't know this person. Like, there's no other brown belts. Like, there's probably 5 brown belts on the East Coast and another 5 on the West Coast. Like, who's this person? And so I went to Henzo and I was like, look, I don't really want to teach jujitsu. I want to just do jujitsu, but like, this guy opened up. Like, I wasn't ready to teach jujitsu. I wasn't a black belt. I didn't have that kind of mentality yet. Like, I thought, it's Henzo's deal, right? So I said, like, would you be opposed if I had a jujitsu program in my karate school? Because, this is, I come from this lineage. I don't want the people around my area to not know what this practice is and learn from this other person. And, and I had his blessings. And that's, I kind of think, an example of the martial art way to handle this issue of teaching.
Yes.
Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a way. And I certainly admire and appreciate and I respect that way. Not, I don't want au contraire, and I'm going to go the opposite way just for the sake of disagreeing, because I don't disagree, I agree, but I can't get them out fast enough. Like I'm at a stage right now where most of what my instructors have taught me directly, it's either gonna be passed on through a lot of other people, or it's gonna go to the grave with me.
Mm-hmm.
And big deal. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, in one sense, my teachers they probably couldn't care less on one level, as much as the martial arts has benefited them and as much value as it has. Most of my teachers are of the mind that if it's principle centered and it's worthwhile, it's going to survive and thrive, perhaps in a different form, in a different manifestation, but it's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. You follow me? So, like, mm-hmm. their brand might go away, but mm-hmm. They don't care. And I got to tell you, like, I don't care. Like, I have 3 children and they're young now, but I'm looking forward to them getting out of the house. I don't want my daughters and my son living in my basement until they're 37. Mm-hmm. When they're ready, I want them to go off and build a life and a family of their own. So, I don't necessarily want them taking my television set with them. Mm-hmm. Like, I'll give them some things. And I don't watch much TV, but just as an example, like, they don't need to take my furniture with them, and they don't need to take their mom. Like, that wouldn't be starting a family of their own. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes people think they're starting a martial arts school of their own. Mm-hmm. by bringing all of their classmates with them. Mm-hmm. And that's really not starting a program of your own. Mm-hmm. That's relocating the program you're in, leaving somebody out of it, and having everybody meet over here and, training in that way. Mm-hmm. So it boils down, for me, it boils down to intention. What are your motives? Like, why are you doing this? Are you really trying to build something, or are you just trying to break something? Mm-hmm. Because I believe that most people get their satisfactions, their deepest satisfactions, from being creative, constructive, and from building. But the alternative is to break things, to be destructive, to destroy things, you know, and it's almost as exciting. It's not quite the same, but they'll settle for it. And I've witnessed this over and over and over again. I have a bunch of former, I don't like to call them students, like guys who I grew up in the martial arts with.
You don't like to call them students?
No, I just don't.
Because they didn't train at the dojo, they were your classmates, or because they
No, they trained at the
longer
dojo. Like I mostly counted from the corner, but if they want to delude themselves into believing that, you know, I wasn't really their instructor, like my instructor was their instructor and I was the middleman. I'll play along.
I understand.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with that. But I couldn't be happier for them that they have programs of their own. And, you know, I think they all went through stages of being a little bit more interested in destroying what I've worked to build rather than building what they envisioned. But it's over now.
How do you, I think I got a little bit of it, but I'm interested to know, like, how do you handle that as a teacher, as an instructor, as a business owner or a school owner? Not that martial arts is, you know, but
you
have to have the school, right? You have to.
Yeah, there's a fine, you know, not a fine line. There's probably a pretty big line between rationalization, you know, like just deciphering and interpreting things in a way that serves you best. And then there's things that are closer to reality. So, you know, I choose to focus on the advantage of the more martial arts schools, the merrier. Honestly, it becomes very burdensome to have a 37-year-old living in your basement. You know, I've had guys that they stuck around for way too long. You know, there's the whole idea of student for life, and you can train at the same dojo, you know, from cradle to the grave. But if you have aspirations of having your own school, you ought to get out and do it. You ought to get out and do it, but you ought to get out and do it in a forthright way, in a way that's more wholesome. Like you mentioned earlier that your database and the use of it is against the law. You know, this might sound abstract, but there's no laws. There are no laws. Like there's right and there's wrong. There's correct principle. I don't want to, in other words, I don't want to reduce it to the penal code. It's just the wrong thing to do. It's a bad move. Like you're poaching.
It didn't work. You know,
Right. But whether it works or it doesn't work, like the fact that it's against the law, if it were not against the law, it would still be wrong. It's just the wrong thing. It's a violation of your integrity. You know it. I know it. We all know it. So I would say this, like, if you're a member of a dojo, it's in your best interest to grow that dojo. It's your dojo. That's like, well, it's not my dojo. It has somebody else's name on it. Yeah, but it has you in it. Like whose name is on it is not as important as who's in it. And it's the most important thing is not the one individual who's in it, but the synergy created by everyone in it. And there's no better way, sorry about that, there's no better way to prepare for having a dojo with your name on it someday than to grow the one you're now a member of. And there's no easier way, I shouldn't even say easy, there's no more effective way of growing your dojo when the time comes than is with the support of the place you came from. Like one of your students wanted to open up a dojo, you could dramatically accelerate the process of their progress if it were to be a cooperative endeavor, just in everybody's best interest. But, and, you know, again, this goes back to, and I don't want to ruffle feathers, but, you know, well, I really don't, but.
As soon as you say but, the feathers get ruffled. Go ahead.
I don't really think they do. Like, I'd be hard pressed to get someone to give me an explanation for why this isn't true. We're all in this together. Now, when you push back on that, there's people like, that's a terrible, well, look, I'm not saying that it's not terrible. I think it is terrible that we're in fact not all in this together. I mean, we're in the mess. There's a mess we're all in. But I think it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous to believe that everybody has each other's best interests at heart. And we know better. We know better. And like, if we want to polarize it like right then and there, the moment we polarize it is the admission of the fact that we don't have everybody's best interest at heart. Like if there's two sides and the sides are opposing, clearly not everybody has each other's best interests at heart. So I think it's just very important, if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna not, in the example you're going through right now, for so-and-so to suggest that he's not consciously aware of the fact that he's destroying something that you've worked so hard to build. It's not going to be destroyed ultimately, but he's chipping away at it. And he's not only chipping away at it himself, he's recruiting others into this destructive behavior. And it's adversarial. Like don't like sit back and go, you know, we're all on the same team and yay. And I'm just trying to, you know, I'm trying to continue with the cause. No, you're not. That's just not true. You're angry. Something happened. I don't know what, but you find it appropriate to steal. You know, you somehow you think like, I'm going to steal because rather than building a program from the bottom up, where did you start, Gian? Like when you opened up your school, I remember how many students I had when I opened up my school. Zero.
I started in a loading dock.
Yeah, because it was flat. It was flat.
Yep. It was a
private
dock that was in the back of a parking lot on Avenue M and Nostrand Avenue, which in 1994 was not the best neighborhood. It was industrial. It was you know, desolate, and what built it and then moved to a location on Avenue N in East 46th Street, right off of Flatbush, also not the best neighborhood, and built it, you know?
Yeah, and again, like when you start from zero, you tend to have a very deep appreciation for every increment of growth forever. Like you never forget that you started with zero.
Yeah, I remember coming to Orangeburg, and I think at that time I had like, at the Avenue U location, Joe Tallarico and I had parted ways, and he took the Avenue N location and I took Avenue U, and there was between 50 and 75 students there. A blessing, but not where I wanted to be. And I remember like breaking 100 active, right? And then 125. And then, coming up and celebrating those milestones with you. Like they still are some of the most powerful experiences. You just,
yeah,
because you work hard for them.
yes. Yeah. So, look, you're going to be just fine. And that's really like,
Yes.
that's the, I have one strained relationship of all the instructors who I've trained under.
Uh-huh.
I only have one strained relationship, and it's excruciatingly painful. Like it bothers me because I take responsibility. And I hope someday to correct the strain on that relationship. But I don't have these like horrible relationships with the people who I trained under. All of them, with the exception of one that's semi-strained, and I blame myself. I just don't know what it's like to I don't know what it would be like to have to make up some tall tales about the reality of my martial arts background. And that guy wasn't really my teacher. And this person, I learned some kata. They showed me this or they showed me that. And I was there for a while. I taught there. Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing. And it, when you violate your conscience, apparently, if you talk to a really, really good oncologist, what she'll tell you is there's no more powerful carcinogenic catalyst than the stress caused by the violation of your own conscience. Mm-hmm. And, I just don't want that kind of, that sort of thing metastasizing in my biochemistry.
You and I have talked about this, and I think that this is a good one. This is a good watch out. But like you and I have talked about that, I myself have put my instructors in a place where, I've had to reconcile those points, but that I put them in this place where they were up too high in this way, that like the only place they had to go was disappointing me.
Yes.
And I have gotten myself into positions where I have not been on good terms with my instructors, but that wasn't their fault. That was my fault. That was my fault because I was looking for something that was impossible to find. I was looking for it outside rather than looking inside and fulfilling the gaps. And I don't mean filling, I mean fulfilling them. Like they need to be healed. The martial arts gives us the tools to handle those issues.
Yes.
And I really very much appreciate the way that you framed the strained or semi-strained relationship that you have, because it is our responsibility. We have to take accountability for it.
Sure.
And I've had to do a lot of work around that. Mm-hmm. It hasn't always been easy.
No, it's very difficult. It's extremely difficult, but it's more than worth it.
It's important.
Yeah. This goes back to like, I'm not ultra religious, but it's the difference between God and guide. I can remember I'd come across my classmates and they're on to greener pastures, and they like, oh, we're training with so-and-so. And, he's a jujitsu god. Mm-hmm. And I cringe because no, he's a jujitsu guide. Mm-hmm. And the poor fellow doesn't pass himself off as a jujitsu god. Mm-hmm. You're doing that to him. Like he didn't do that to him. Mm-hmm. You're setting this poor fellow up for a big fall. And you're positioning him as a as a martial arts god, and it's only a matter of time before people realize it. It's the same issue that people face in leadership throughout the world. They're looking not for just the father figure, which is pathetic enough in and of itself.
Careful here, we're going to get into that hard left.
I don't mean to. I just
playing with you, man. I know. I think it's a brilliant conversation.
I don't mean to offend anyone, but like,
no.
I would be offending people if I said, look, this is the guy. He's like a god. Mm-hmm. Like that I'm setting you up. Like, look for your wallet. Look for your wallet. I've probably picked your pocket. Mm-hmm. I'm not ultra religious, but I have this paradigm that God is God, and infallible. But for the rest of us, guide. I think this person's a great leader, and this great leader is going to guide us through. Mm-hmm. It's a great guide. Mm-hmm. Guide, not God. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with an instructor is you're setting yourself up for disaster by elevating somebody to a position to which they can never live up to.
Yeah, one of the other black belts that knows about this was like, in some ways, I think a lot of these guys put us in a position where we're like their fathers.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they've got to kill us off. They've got to kill their father off. And while I think it's kind of common, I do think it's interesting that it like kind of plays into this paradigm of destructive or constructive, creative or destructive. And I do think it takes something, and it does take some ability to navigate some, rough waters. It's not easy to have some of these conversations, but if you want to do it well and do it correct, they need to be done. You don't need to go around the back way, if you will.
Yeah, you also have to say, like, did you think it through? Have you thought it through? Like, have you just thought it through a little bit? Like a year, like 3 years, like 5 years, like project your consciousness, like put your imagination on where this is going, rather than like next week or next month. Go a little further than that. And with a little bit of foresight, you don't have to be Nostradamus, but with a little bit of foresight, you can usually, arrive at the right conclusion. You could usually figure out that there's a better way. Like, this is probably not the way to do it. There's a better way to go about this. But I do think you make a great point that if we're remiss in making ourselves approachable, mm-hmm. Like, here's the thing, like, again, I'm not a priest. Like, no one needs to get my blessing. I don't need someone to come to me for my blessing when they open up, a martial arts school, even if it's across the street. They don't need, in that instance, they don't need my blessing, and they're certainly not going to get it. Mm-hmm. It's across the street. Like, think it through. Like, I welcome it, but think it through. Now, if it's look, I want to open up a school, and these are my reasons, and these are my goals, and not only I'm not going to give you my blessing, but I'm going to congratulate you, and I'm going to help you in any way I can. I'm going to go all out.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I'm going to bend but I'm remiss if I don't make that obvious. Like, I don't want, someday my daughter is going to perhaps introduce me to a young man who's going to realize that it's not out of fashion to ask permission for the opportunity to propose to my daughter, but to first seek my approval. It's a good idea. It's not outdated. It's not, now again, like, you're right. It's not, there's no law. How dare I dare. It'd be a good idea, but what would be a bad idea is if I make it unreasonable. In other words, some fine young man who my daughter is in love with and who's in love with my daughter goes through all the right steps. And again, like I expect this fellow to be a god amongst men, and he's not going to be. And I shut him down. Well, then I'm gonna create a situation that I don't want. So I have to make sure I'm rolling out the red carpet and letting everyone know the door's open and the communication's open, and we can discuss this and do it the right way. If I put up barriers, then maybe it's my own fault. I don't think you've done that. In fact, I know that you have.
The mat chat that I had afterwards was that, like, listen, everyone, this is how I did it, and it's how I expect it to be done. Like, just come and have a conversation.
Yes.
And there'll be no issue. Like, have a conversation. If this is your dream, it's your dream. Go do it. I'd be happy to support it.
Sure. But again, like, what neuroses, like what disturbances? Right now, you have a situation, like, are they not training with you because in the way that you're offering training, do they feel like they're being restricted from practicing their martial art in the way in which they're accustomed? And because your school's on the map, that they can't do that in that way because of guidelines? Is that
this was pre-COVID?
Oh, was it?
This started pre-COVID.
I'm sorry. I wasn't.
No, like, I'll tell you, like, I knew about these guys. Like, I know that they have like this Sunday thing going on, right?
Yeah.
Right? This, in quotation, Sunday thing. And frankly, I reached out to them and I was like, look, you guys training? Like, during this 8 months, like, you training? And they were like, yeah, we're good. And I was like, good, I'm happy to hear it. Keep training. I'll see you on the other side of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the wherewithal. He didn't have the wherewithal to go, like, and by the way, I'm teaching at this other school, and people from your school are paying tuition over there, or that, like, my school, like, you know what I mean, in the context of this conversation.
Yeah,
right?
no, I know what you mean. I know exactly. I know what you mean.
So like, I felt, because of the restrictions and all that stuff, if they were in a little pod and they were all in an agreement and they were keeping up with their practice, great. Like,
yes,
that's what, of course I want that.
yes,
and I'll see you on the other side.
yes. So let me make a couple more suggestions, or just a couple more observations. It's very flattering to be held to high standards. It's flattering. It's, you hold your students to very high standards. You do. I don't know if you know it or not, but sometimes it's tempting for people to circumvent the process. And, we all like shortcuts. We do. We all like shortcuts. We all don't necessarily like the horrible consequences that often come along with shortcuts. We certainly enjoy shortcuts. So there's an element of they think that they're able to get the same thing with less of your scrutiny. And that might come as a shock to you, because one of the things that makes your dojo unique and makes it special and gives it its identity is the standards you hold people to.
Yeah, it's no shock to me.
Okay. Yeah.
Frankly, like, I've been used to, I've been in this like, I've been conditioned since, and I said this, like, we opened that first jiu-jitsu school in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, The walls were white, the mat was white, and everybody wore a white gi.
Bizarre.
It was, but now, like, I love looking at the art of jujitsu, AOJ, and the Mendes brothers and what they're doing. Like, I'm like, wow, like, look, there's finally a place where they can be accepted. But like in
Yeah.
those days,
If I need shoulder surgery, I'm not going to HSS. I'm going to their dojo
yeah,
and bringing the surgeon there.
yeah,
That's how clean the environment
right,
is, and I love
right.
it. But
Yeah, in
that
those
is so unique.
in those days in
Yeah.
2005, I was the guy who was killing jujitsu.
Yeah, you were destroying.
I was the guy who was,
You,
because I didn't let people train in their underwear with no shirts.
yes, yes.
Like,
So
right.
all right. So a lot of what you have going on has to do with that. Like, look,
I know.
I have
know,
a dojo
even today, right? I got it. That's why I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I thought it would be an interesting
It
conversation.
is interesting because look, there's a bunch of people, I hope, who are listening to this who are like, I mean, we could talk about whether like this grip or this grip or this grip. We could talk about that. There's a time for that, but I hope there's people listening who are at or near or beyond the black belt level, and this conversation resonates with them because they're having thoughts of opening up a school,
or even an instructor who has black belts that isn't aware that his guys.
Yeah, who certainly has, that I can categorically guarantee you, has students who are having thoughts of having the program. It's important to get a head start.
The other reason I thought it was important because, like, it was disappointing to me. And then, like the last conversation we had was like, I remember it was so good because you were like, look, you don't want someone in your life that's disconnected. Like, I want to be showing this guy and the other students, like, I'm not disconnected from my emotions. Like, even if I created an environment where this occurred and it's my fault, like, it still sucks. It's still like, I can take accountability for it, but like, yo, you do too. Like, and I'm disappointed.
Yeah. And what sucks most, correct me if I'm wrong, but what sucks most is you got a bunch of guys who, when they realize how slimy the behavior has been, it's not that you're not going to open up your doors to them. They're not going to want to face you. They're just not going to. They have enough self-respect and just not quite enough courage to confront the sliminess of what's occurred. And they're just going to they're going to lose out on their martial arts thing that they love. And that's
it's not just your instructor. It's like
it's not just you and this guy. It's the people.
Yeah.
What it really is the people in between. It's the people in between. So, here's a when you talk about feelings and an emotional attachment and the sort of social consciousness, two guys who jump out at me. I used to, when I met them both, that's John Coquinos and Dave Kovar. They talk about, I thought all their friends were dead. I'd listen to John Coquinos and he would talk about people, and I used to think, man, this poor guy, everyone who he talks about is dead. They're dead. And the same with Dave Kovar. He'd bring up a name, and then all of a sudden I go like, wait a minute, that guy's alive. And I wanted to tap him on the shoulder and go, that guy's alive. And I realized that all of them were alive. It's just that they didn't wait for people to be dead before they spoke of them. in a dignified manner, in a way that was honorable and respectful, and that recognized and acknowledged their greatest good. I mean, the only time I shouldn't say the only, but usually I only hear people speak that way of others when they're dead. When they're dead. And the reason I bring it up is like, you know, when my first teacher passes, I'm not gonna bounce at his funeral. I'm not gonna bounce. But I'm definitely gonna remind some people of the things they said about him while he was alive. And it's gonna be painful, not physically, but emotionally. But I owe it not to my teacher or to myself, but I owe it to them. I owe it to my classmates who've said some very, very disparaging things about this guy who did nothing other than try to bring out the best in all of us, like dedicated himself to our personal development, to our improvement, holding us to very, very high standards and you know, I don't want to say getting very little from it or for it in return. I think he got a tremendous amount from it and for it. But I don't want to hear it like, for he's a jolly good fellow. I will remind my classmates of the horrible negative things that they said when they had the chance. I mean, I you know, like, do you ever call them? Do you let them, like, do you ever let them know how much you appreciate X, Y, or Z? Because you're letting me know how much you don't appreciate these other things. And I think that is a burden that if you're in the martial arts right now, you should relieve yourself of. You should relieve yourself of the burden of that guilt. And in all your relationships. But there's a bunch of people who you're coming up with in the martial arts, your classmates. And you know, if you're one IQ point stupider than I am, you might have tricked yourself into believing that they're your enemy. That, forget about opponent or partner, like, I mean your enemy, that they're your adversary, that, you know, that these guys who you train with are the only thing standing in the way of you and your goal. Like, knock it off, cut it out. Those guys who you train with, some of them are the only people who are directly supportive in a participatory way of your goal. But you've fooled yourself into believing that they're your arch enemy, that they're your rival, that they're the bad guy. And you're gonna regret it. You're gonna feel bad. Like, none of us are getting out of here alive. You know, 6 months ago, when we thought it was the end of the world, people were emotional, you know, and I don't miss it. I gotta tell you, like, I remember guys going, I just wish things could be the way they were on September 12th and September 13th. I couldn't wait I remember driving through Manhattan, and the first time I heard somebody said, "F you, motherfucker," I was like, we're back, baby. Like, things are normal again. And I mean that because it was authentic. I don't mean it because those terrible words or, you know, or negativity, but what I mean is it was authentic. Because on September 12th, it wasn't so authentic. And the beginning of COVID-19, it wasn't necessarily so authentic. And the measurement of my estimation of the authenticity is, how do you feel about those people right now, since they're not on a ventilator? Like, they're not going to go. Like, you thought, like, I might never see him again. And now you realize you're going to see him again. You're going to be training with him. And he's going to kick you in the face, like, or he's going to lock out your arm, or he's going to triangle you, whatever it is. But that person is your classmate. That person is supporting you in your journey through the martial arts. Like, let them know how much you love them now, because you may not ever get another chance. You just don't know. You don't know. That's authentic. It's not authentic when I'm in a box and I can't like sit up and go, that's not what you said. Like, don't tell people what a great guy I was when I wasn't. Be authentic, and you've done it. Listen, man, you called me out on my BS lots of times. And that's why I love you so much. Like, you're not waiting because you might not get another chance. And you've also expressed your gratitude and your appreciation. That's authentic. And when it comes to the senpai kohai relationship, even when that senpai kohai relationship is instructor and student, because that's senpai kohai, authenticity is best. Communicate, convey how you feel. What are your intentions? What are you looking to do? I'm not going to sabotage your success. I'm going to support it. Don't be a sneak.
Beautiful. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.